Sergio, very, very important is our soil, and we're a bit inclined to overlook it.
Definitely. I think that we rely on soils to feed ourselves, and it's part of our legacy. And if we want it to survive, we have to take care of it. And I think farmers need to understand that it's an alive medium. It's not just a place to put things, but that it's a living, breathing organism.
We overlook, I guess, a lot of what happens under the ground. Can you explain a wee bit about what we're overlooking as far as we need those microbits to feed the grass, to feed the animals, and it come back in again?
Sure. So microorganisms make up a bulk majority of what's in soils, and those organisms play a role in those soils. We tend to think about this relationship as plants are consuming nutrients, but we're missing the point that there's a relationship with all the microbes that are in there, and it's an entire community, and it works as a system. So in order to make the system work and work efficiently, we need to account for those microbes that carry out the processes that under a normal ecosystem would be provided by the organisms that are in the soils.
Tell me about your story about the termites and the cattle.
Oh, so essentially I was trying to make the point of how we have evidence of how microbes are the engines that transform raw materials into materials that can be used by other organisms. And it's a repetitive sort of story that's found in the world. If you look at living organisms, their guts are full of microorganisms that turn nutrients into forms that can be taken up by that host. And soils work in the exact same way. Those organisms in the soils are the engines that make the nutrients available for the plants. So it's almost like it's the stomach of the world.
So a termite doesn't actually get nutrient out of the timber it eats?
No, it doesn't. So the termite is actually feeding that wood to the organisms in its stomach, who then produce sugars and amino acids that the termite can then take up.
And the same thing with dairying, I guess, with grass.
Yep. So it's one of the areas of research that people are paying a lot of attention to now. It's the fact that when you feed an animal, in this case a cow, the organisms in the rumen will actually break down that feed and produce volatile fatty acids that the cow then takes up, and that's what ends up in milk and meat.
Sergio, I guess we should identify what is in the soil and what's not, rather than a blanket NPK.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do in my lab. It's identify the organisms that are present in different types of soils so that we can understand who's there and what is their role. And hopefully by making that connection, we can target how to manipulate individual groups of organisms for the benefit of either an ecosystem or a farmer.